Okay, so welcome again, Full Circle folks, and anyone else listening. And I'm really delighted to be back finally with Christopher Gardner, who doesn't really keep still for long. Christopher, welcome. It's really nice to have you sitting still for a while so that we can get to grips with what you've been doing and also to hear your latest observations. How are you?
I'm doing great, Luis. It's great to be back with you.
Indeed. And I think you're coming to us from America. From which part of
Yeah,
America are you in?
from my hometown, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. In fact, where I'm at right now, I'm literally 3 blocks away from the first school that I ever attended
Wow.
as a little tyke.
That will be bringing back some memories for you then, I'm sure. But you've been, as usual, very keenly observant of your environment and the effect that this is having on yourself and others. So I'm very interested to hear how this is comparing with the environment that you're often in Costa Rica. So start, Christopher, by telling us about your recent observations.
The main observation that kind of struck me was I've been doing a lot of installations of thermal mass heaters for different clients all over the world, and they all tend to have children. And so it's been a lot of fun, talking to parents because I'm not a father yet. And I just love to talk to everybody and get their perspective. And no matter where I'm at, whether I'm in an industrialized area or I'm, out in the city, the consensus that I've seen is that children are much more advanced. And by advanced, I mean they're older than their years. They don't have the innocence per se that, or I shouldn't say innocence. Innocence is the wrong word. They don't have the naivety that I remember having at the same given ages. So I've been witnessing this for a few years, and then it all kind of cascaded on me the other day where it just flashed. It was one of those epiphanies where I could see information, the amount of information that all of us are exposed to, but especially children, is a stimulant. And just like any other stimulant that's out there, if you binge on stimulants, your body takes it, your mind takes it, and it ages you. So even though your biological age could be, still, what it is, because your mind is reaching capacity quicker, there's certain reflections in your consciousness that will mirror that. And when I brought this up to my friend Chantel, who's a mother of two, she she had a full Kundalini response. She's like, "Oh my God, she's just like, I never thought of it that way. You're so right." And it's just like I look at the amount of electronic devices that are just in everybody's life now. It's not just kids, but we all see screens all the time. And with that, that's all data. And I've really been looking at this for a long time because there's few and far between moments where I actually get to have what I would term philosophical discussions with people. Just because I don't think there's enough time for the normal person to synthesize information. They're so inundated with this stimulus of data that they can't take a break and just sit there and really think about the data that they're taking in. And when I look back at my childhood, I mean, and I'm not projecting this onto everybody else. Everybody has their own unique experience, but in my own particular childhood, I had two very narcissistic, hardworking parents, so that meant I had tons of time to myself. And I learned to be comfortable in my own skin, entertaining myself, right? So I would observe my surroundings and just kind of really kind of chew on it for a while. And it's really weird no matter where whether I'm in Costa Rica or Europe or, the States. I don't see children having the same time freedom. And so there's a correlation between time freedom and contemplation. And I really wonder if, and I know this is my my conspiratorial mind, I really wonder if that's engineered. Like many things in our life, social engineering is a real thing that not many people are aware of. And it's just like if you want to overwhelm your opponent in the art of war, you just give them too many things to worry about. Not just one thing. You just hit them with a ton of different things to contemplate, and then you cause this paralysis by over analysis. But it's not over analysis of one thing. It's analyzing a bunch of things simultaneously. So it's just one of these big things that when I brought it up to the parents after I saw it, all of them seemed to be like, wow, that's really true. And so some of them have tried to put into practice this, non-information suck time, just like contemplation time, just being with one's experience long enough where they can actually figure it out.
Yeah, no, I can I can certainly contemplate that well enough and have done so, and I think it's no real conspiracy to see that we whether the traps are set up for us initially. I mean, the fact is we're not observant enough to not fall into them, and it's also very addictive, this material and this information. It's feeding the mind, it feeds the intellect in a way which is again convenient. It's off the shelf, really, isn't it? It's easily accessible, and we can do it on the move, which for many seems to be an additional bonus, so that they can pack more into their day, their busy day. But would you say it's an addiction as well as a stimulant? It's kind of a two-edged dilemma there.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I've been lucky enough to live the life of a yogi for, I'd say about 1/4 of my life. And one of the things that we would do, pretty regularly was do Vipassana, where we would go just into silence for a week. And that was really tough. I remember the first time I did it, I was in my 20s, and I was like, it was hell, to shut up. I'm a pretty loquacious person, but in the Vipassana thing the Vipassana process that I was a part of, it wasn't only that I was quiet, it was that I would limit the amount of inputs. I would literally just be quiet and not take anything else in. And we had a hurricane that ran over us here in South Florida in the early 2000s, and it knocked the power out for a couple weeks. So it was really amazing. You couldn't go anywhere. I was in this Vipassana retreat, and there was no chance of information coming in, right? And it was awesome. By like day 2, just to fully rest. And the whole notion in that line of thought is that it's this whole stimulation thing. It's called being rajasic. Everything's spicy. So you become very, very rajasic when you're always taking in new things. So just like if you're to have a protocol with healing your gut, you would start to limit your inputs and just allow the body to have 1 or 2 inputs. It's the same thing with your mind. And but nobody ever used the terminology that data is a stimulant, and nobody ever talked about it prematurely aging you. Mm. And that's what I've really noticed, is that these kids are so advanced in their thinking. It's a weird thing, because it's not that they're advanced as in better. It's just that they're just older. Older is a better way of saying it. I shouldn't say advanced. Like, I meet these 10-year-olds, and they're like where I was when I was 16 from an age perspective. and from a interaction, like an interpersonal interaction perspective. But, you know, they look the same. It's just where they are. And I really think there's something to, like, Rupert Sheldrake's model of the morphogenetic field. You know, the more information that's pumped into the noosphere, which is like the realm of the mind, we all are, you know, moving through this like a sponge in the ocean of information. You know, we're all kind of moving through it. So even if the children are in like rural Costa Rica, they're still being impinged upon this higher frequency of data. It's still having an effect. And I will put the caveat out there that this is all anecdotal. Like, I have no no testing or anything like that. It just seems to be a consistent thing that I perceive. And given what I do, like my whole work is centered around being ultra sensitive to people in my environment. And when I bring this up to others, they seem to be like, wow, that does seem like that's happening. So I thought it was pretty relevant to bring up, especially when considering all of us, at least within the Full Circle Project, are trying to figure out ways of adapting, you know, in a cellular upregulation way, like just trying to get better and trying to navigate these waters of all this extra stuff, you know. It's just not a simple time anymore. So, it's kind of cool to have the capacity to look at what stimulants do to us and then create I guess you would say a behavioral pattern or create a protocol that will help people adjust.
Yes, it's interesting you should bring that up, because with the Full Circle Project, I think one of the initial things that we could see is that we have a general information overload, and that it's actually very difficult to filter the things which are well-founded or that are really relevant and not just there to constantly, continuously distract us and make us dart from one thing to the other without having the time, as you say, to contemplate and reflect and see how sensible or otherwise the information is, how relevant or otherwise the information is, and what its real intention is in terms of distracting us away from the essential things in life, which is to live, just to live fully. And we were wanting very much to filter information into a more refined way, so that we were always encouraging people to spend less time on the computer, less time in front of the screen, less time posting, and find ways to remind people to have action-based projects and motivate and support people to do that with just the right information, just enough information. And that's always been really that idea of information in, information out, that sort of filtering process. But the fact that you're also recognizing it in children makes me wonder, is this also another attack, do you think, in a way, on what we consider those childhood years? Could it be seen this way too?
Oh, absolutely. To me, it's an obvious thing. When you look into what Co-Intel Pro is, at least from the United States perspective, I don't think everything originates from the United States. I think the United States is sort of the testing ground for all the new controlled doodads out there. Let's control people through convenience. So what I see is like I read I think it's The Art of War from Sun Tzu, like way back in the day, and he talks about overwhelming your opponent with data. You know, he doesn't use those terms, but that's just a more updated way of putting it. Like, if you get somebody thinking, like in a fight, if you get them thinking during a physical fight, you've won. Because when they're thinking, they can't react. I'm not talking about contemplating or synthesizing. I'm talking about where they're guessing. You know, most of thinking is guessing.
Yeah.
So it's so great is that, you know, you look at how much energy is put into miseducation, you know, reading all of John Taylor Gatto's books and his, you know, weapons of mass education and learning about the Prussian schooling system, and then, you know, measuring that against the success that my friends have had with homeschooling their children and seeing how much more brilliant these children are because they haven't been, you know, programmed with operant conditioning, and they're not these like reactive automatons. It's very obvious that, you know, the governments of the world look at children the way the church does. I mean, who was the famous person that said, give me the child for the first 7 years and I need not worry about them for the rest of their life? It's like the formative conditioning is really the big stuff. So when you can educate or miseducate or misinform somebody at the lower levels, you can really steer them in any direction you want after that. I mean, look at how much time it's taken for us to deprogram ourselves. I mean, to this day, I find information where it's like, you know, pulling out splinters in my consciousness. So it's an ongoing thing. And so when it comes to inundating a person with information, this is very well known in mind control. You look at it with I was talking with Dr. Daniels about it in the schooling that they do for doctors. It's indoctrination. They sleep deprive you, and then they load you with way too much information so you can never stop and say, is this correct? You know, wait a minute. You don't ever have time. It's go, 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 you know, and you just don't you can't synthesize. So I'm of the firm belief that, and this is another thing, and I don't mean to sound insulting, is that what I've noticed too is people that aren't that intelligent love data collection and hate contemplation. So they are very good at regurgitating things that like Neil deGrasse Tyson says, but they have no context. Right? And that's what synthesis gives you. It gives you context. It gives you the big picture overview. And the more stupid is a person, and I will call people stupid because people are not equal. There are stupid people. When I meet somebody that is not intelligent, and when I use the word stupid, I mean they're not intelligent, but they pretend that they are. They're trying to, they're trying to be that in sort of a gimmicky way. They're just really good regurgitators. That to me isn't thinking. That to me is like, haha, look at me, look at what I know. And they could give a shit about context. They really do not care about the truth of things. And so that's like the big, to me, from my perspective, at least with adults, that is the big line in the sand. Is your guiding principle truth? If it isn't, if all that you care about is to know the next like crafty little thing to say or learn the next, conspiracy to be, controversial or whatever, then you're going to have some problems. But if a person really wants to know the truth of the matter, the truth will set you free. And usually those people I have found are actually extremely humbling. They're humble. Their opinions aren't consensus, but they're humble. They're like, the truth will humble you. So it's a very interesting thing. And the thing I find about most children is, at least the ones that I've interacted with, the truth turns them on. And I think that's a natural thing when you're a kid. You're very inquisitive and you're curious and all these things, but your curiosity and your inquisitiveness gets, beaten out of you because you're lied to all the time. I mean, what percentage of what you were told when you were growing up ended up being a lie? like through the education system? What would you say?
Well, you might be asking me, the wrong person here, because as you know, I was lucky enough to get out of school when I was 13, and also
That's right.
lucky enough lucky enough to have, I think, a pretty decent creative school where imagination was encouraged. So
That's right.
I think I scraped free of a lot of too much conditioning, let's say. But yes, certainly with my son, when he did go to school, which of course he now doesn't either, but yeah, even he at a very young age was questioning why none of this made sense. None of it made sense, and why was he having to do this, and why did he need to repeat it? And he would just say tonterías, tonterías. So he knew from a very young age, and I couldn't say otherwise, because it was clear that it didn't have any relevance to life, and was of no interest, was not generating any curiosity or any challenge to explore anything. It was just dead. It was just dead before it came off the page. So yeah, I can absolutely concur with what you're saying, and this is where again it comes back also to the atmosphere, the spaces that we offer our children, in where they can gather, and where they can, even if it's self-directed, they can be in an atmosphere where it's conducive to that kind of exploration, and where information is naturally coming from within. Because isn't the word education linked to bringing that which is within you out? Isn't that
Yes.
the sign of a true teacher or educator, is that they're enabling the person to tap into their own innate knowledge and find ways of expressing that through art, through words, through music, whatever resonates with that individual. So
Yes, and this is the thing too, is I see, like, I was a problem child apparently because I was rebellious. But when I look back at it, I was rebellious to those fuckers that were lying to me.
yeah.
I'm still rebellious to the assholes that are lying to me. When I look at the people that were actually of merit, like I was just talking to Mackenzie about it, like the people of merit I respected and held dear, and I never disrespected. It was the dipshits that were using their age and position as an authority figure over me to spout some bullshit at me. Like, I had a bullshit detector without even knowing I had a bullshit detector. The way it would present in me is like, I would tune out. I would just tune out and not do what they said, because as a kid, you don't really know what's right or whatever. You're sort of at the whim of whoever your teachers are. But looking back at it, I just had this natural thing of like, oh, you're fucking full of shit. And I'm not going to listen to you. I'm not going to do what you tell me to do. And so that's my own thing. Not everybody's wired that way. But in that, like, I hate the fact that there's all these institutions out there, and there's Common Core education, and there's all of these ways of implementing mind control that takes a very, very, very long time to deprogram. Like, it just takes, we're wasting so much time. And I shouldn't say we, because it's not me that's doing it. But the systems that are in place are really there to take our time. For the longest time, I thought it was that the systems in place were there to take our money, it was a big money siphon. But they can print all the money they want. Money isn't the thing. What they're trying to do, and you and I have touched on this before, is they're trying to take our time. There's something from an esoteric level where time and our soul are the same thing. Like, they're just the same thing. Like, we're only given so much time, and we're given it. And it's like, if this I don't even know what you would term it, this overarching macro parasite wants to consume our time. It consumes our time by duping us to do stupid shit. And it fools us, and it's just like, whether it's like, working for something that's destructive or paying taxes or whatever the fuck it is, believing in propaganda, all of it you can kind of summarize into wasting time. It's giving attention to something that is unreal. It's not truthful. It's inverting what is real. And I know I'm just like, spouting off here, but it seems to be pretty systemic all around the world. So, yeah, my goal is to actually look at time as an investment. And the best way to look at time as an investment is to uh, sharpen my skills, my analytical skills, and have the capacity to know the truth and be in alignment with the truth. And so a lot of that has to deal with synthesizing information. And this is a big thing that gets lost, is if I read something, to take a break and not take any more inputs, and then measure that against my surroundings to really contemplate things. And in that, I've engineered a life where I have time. And that's a rarity. Like, people nowadays just don't have time, and maybe that's because of that big macrocosmic parasite. But like, I've been able to create enough time freedom for myself where I can think, like I can actually contemplate things, and I can discuss and converse with people like you, like, wow, what is this? And we can all kind of like bounce ideas off of each other and start to understand things from a contextual basis.
Interesting, because actually I was talking about this very thing briefly, not indulging in a lot of time consuming talk, but with people that are staying here, this idea of people saying, oh, I don't have time for that, I don't have time for the other. But actually, changing that phrase to I can make time is in a form remembering to prioritize the various tasks that we might have, the various responsibilities that we might take on, and of course having the discipline to be able to set time aside, this really, really valuable asset that we have, that in fact is life. Time is life, isn't it? Time equals life.
Right.
Time equals art. And if we decide to be disciplined enough to make time, we literally can create time. I find myself creating more time almost out of nowhere if I prioritize, and I can discern, yes, with my mind and with my heart, I'm going to say, what is going to have the most far-reaching benefit, to myself or to others, depending on the topic that I'm looking at, or the task that I'm setting about. But it is again up to us, not being swept along in the trends, and not being swept along in this kind of information soup. And you do have to make decisions to step out of it and take a break, have a fast. What are your, let's get practical for a moment, Christopher, because I know that you will have some very practical, tactical advice for people who can sense that they're perhaps getting caught up in this information overstimulant soup. How can they take a break long enough to consider their priorities and how they're using their time?
Well, I want to just put this out there from the get-go, because a lot of people have so many responsibilities that they've given themselves that I do really recognize the need for one's own time. Like, what I've noticed is, whether a person's in a family or their job or all the combination of different things, the first thing and the foremost thing I want to state is that a person needs to have enough time just with themselves. And what I mean by that is find that alone time. And the night owls that I know, to each one of them, the reason why they're night owls is because during the day they're with people all the time. And so when they actually get into the night and then there's less mind in the noosphere, they feel like they can actually be with themselves, and they enjoy that. They enjoy not having they enjoy not being stimulated by other people directly around them. It's a reprieve. It's a way of resting. And it might sound antithetical to rest, but it's not. Like, they get to be alone. So I would say find times during the day where you actually get to be alone and enjoying yourself, like just enjoying your own demeanor, your own personality, your own way of thinking. That's first and foremost. Second thing is always give a part of your day to exercising, sort of blowing out your pipes. And what I mean by exercising is getting your heart rate up high enough where you can't think. Any of us who've exercised, to a great extent, there's a certain point I'm not talking about a runner's high where you run till you have like adrenaline coursing through your veins, but like where you get your heart rate up high enough where you're just there with the action at hand. And that's a great way of sort of hitting the reset button on your nervous system, so your nervous system can process information. So finding alone time for oneself during the day, I think, is important. Exercising is important. And then if you find yourself getting overstimulated with all this information about things that are so far away. This is the thing about the internet, is it makes you worry about shit that's not close to you. Mm-hmm. Is to garden. I know this sounds weird, especially with my last name being Gardner, but I find nothing gets me more present than having my hands on plants. There's a frequency range with plants that is so much slower than even touching humans. There's just like, they bring you back literally to the earth, to the soil. So when you're touching a plant, you're touching the ground, you're grounded out. And when this occurs, I have yet to meet anybody that regularly deals with an organic garden that doesn't feel immense relief. Like the sense that everybody kind of capitulates is, I don't have to worry so much. Plus there's a confidence. There's a confidence that occurs when you're growing your own food or even your own flowers. Like, you're like, if worse comes to worse, I can at least grow something, So it's like it's a two-edged sword of goodness on that side. So those three things are really practical and easy. Almost anybody can do those things. And then, like, if you have, let's say you have, or like as you would put it, you make more time, do your information gathering while the sun is up, and do your synthesis when the sun is down. So maybe if you like, let's say every day you allocate a few hours to perusing the interwebs, do that when the sun is actually up, and then just like the cycle of the day and night, as the light goes down, allow yourself to do more of like a journaling activity at night, even if it's talking or thinking about what you imbibed from an information perspective during the day. I think one of the things that really isn't looked at when they're looking at people's circadian rhythms is they always are talking about the light componentry of things and how it throws off your circadian rhythm. I don't think it's just light. I think it's actually the information that people are taking in that keeps their mind racing. So you and I have talked about this at length about
Mm.
the whole, kidney yin thing in the evening and how important it is to fall into deep, deep rest. I really, for my own particular physiology, I definitely need to go more into fiction and or nothing at night and not allow the continual problem solving aspect of my brain and consciousness to be, activated, at least, not consistently at night. Like for me, I turn into a gurgling, mess of cytoplasm if I don't sleep well. So I have to turn that part of my brain off. And I'm a morning person anyway, so like I wake up and
I'm laughing, Christopher, because knowing you as I do, and you say you're a morning person, I would say you're a full-on you're a full-on person. I don't know about the nighttime is probably for recharging indeed, but for the rest of the day, you're pretty much full on, not just the
well,
morning.
well, in this context of like information gathering,
Yeah.
I really like doing that in the morning, and then I'll get into physical activity during the day and kind of let my body work it out. Because at least a bunch of us that are into, learning the truth of things is that things are pretty violent out there, especially when you're looking at the topology of authority. So that's sort of upsetting. So it's good to have time during the day to allow the body to work that out. And then also to allow your behavior to come up with solutions. That's very, very important. Always looking at problems and then not actually giving any time to solutions, that becomes very depressing. And I don't recommend it for anybody.
No, and I like the way that that sort of naturally sectioned off the day and the night into sort of three more distinctive areas, because I find this happens to me on a regular basis too, is that with the early morning, the and the sun, when the sun is up high, I'll tend to get most of the mental information in and processing. And then I also like the activity to kind of, I find then I can contemplate, and almost my body is filtering the information that I've put into my brain. It then kind of goes into my body, and whether I'm working or dancing or using some sort of Tai Chi movement where I'm more conscious of my body, or indeed gardening, that's a fantastic one, definitely. This seems to naturally filter out the information that I need to focus on or not. And then by the time the evening and the night comes, then I've let it go, and it takes on a different communication then, and in the dark, literally the darkness has another type of communication level to me, where I can either perhaps work with things in my dreams, or through the crystal work that I do, or writing, or, as you say, something where you can go within at night. I suppose that is the darker side of life. You've got there the two sides of life, the light and the dark. And I know that many people feel uncomfortable with the dark, even though they generally have nighttime wherever they are. But that darkness, even to the degree of having a very cathartic dark night of the soul, this can be an area that people feel fearful of if they're not used to being on their own, if they're not comfortable with their own company, if they haven't gone into this contemplation mode. So that, I think, is a way of looking at yourself and gifting yourself this time, this ability to explore that and to feel comfortable in the darker zones of life, because that's really where a lot of deeper truths lie hidden, I find. So it's
Yeah.
interesting, that sectioning off of your day. I mean, again, people need to be able to extract themselves from this hyped up rhythm, right? That is engineered. They really have to take the choice of stepping back and stepping out. I think this is where we're coming to.
Yes, and I also see like it's a very natural thing when you have the majority of people that are at least that have access to the type of information that you and I talk about. The majority of people are not willing. Their heads are in the sand. They don't want to know. They don't want to admit that they've been fooled.
Mm.
And to me, that's a real sign of arrogance and stupidity at the same time. Their ego is too underdeveloped to recognize that they could be tricked, right? And we've all been tricked. Like there's not a single person on the planet that hasn't been tricked before on small and large scale, right?
Exactly.
So I have a real hard time with people that will use the NLP of the Rand company saying, oh, that's a conspiracy, and they say it like they have no historical precedent, and so they say it as if they're an authority. What's occurring in that moment is that their ego feels threatened. And so they're trying to gain the upper hand by, planting the flag that everything that you say from this point on is invalid. And what I know is more valid, right? There's no open discussion at that point. So I understand truthers, or like people that are trying to really understand the truth. They're almost in a reactionary mode, go all the way over to the other side, and they over inundate their minds and their lives with this information. They binge on it, right?
Mm.
And as a response to the amount or the volume of people that aren't even open to it, right? So if you're to look at like truth as having like an envelope of people that could understand it, and you only have like, a few percentage points of the population that actually look at it, and the rest could give a shit. The people that do look at it stimulate themselves with it. But this is like, you and I have spoken about this. This is a very male thing to do, and it pulls a person's physiology out of balance. And when your physiology goes out of balance, you're fucked. Like, I don't care how smart you are, how great your intellect is, your body is the carrier of all of it. So it's very important to be balanced with the feminine, meaning you have to ground out. You have to become more present. You have to be less big picture oriented and more, small picture detail oriented. And you have to pull yourself back into that on a day-to-day basis, or you're going to spiral out of control. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally. I get a number of pictures coming to mind, but I'd like to delve a little bit more into into what you're seeing manifest in the body work that you're doing, because this idea of information being a stimulant, obviously it will take its stress, its toll on the body. So what are you seeing that you can relate to the information overload expressed through the condition of the body?
What I see is waves of where almost everybody I work on will have the same contraindication. So as of late, what I've noticed is with the uncertainty of economics, almost everybody has solar plexus issues. Solar plexus and then lower back issues. So you have like the second and third chakras right now are really taxed. And I also think this is going to probably rub a few people wrong. But I think the solar plexus issues are endemic to the areas that I've been working, just because there's so many chemtrails. There's not like the capacity to actually interact with the sun without interference. So hence, solar plexus, like
Mm.
your identity, your connection to divinity. I look at the sun from an esoteric perspective as being our information conduit to heaven.
Mm.
So, it supplies heat, radiance, life, and information. And so when it's consistently obscured the way it has been in the Americas where I've been, and even when I was in Europe, it's actually disgusting in Northern Europe how much they spray there. You don't ever get a organic interaction with the sun anymore. So people's solar plexus are really bent. Like, it's crazy.
Mm.
I'm a skin person, obviously, as being a body worker, and I've noticed this as like a tag on almost everybody. Almost everybody has a mole or a scar or some sort of rib issue in that area. I mean, it's like maybe one in 20 people have a clean bill of health in that area. And so I kind of look at things from my yoga training perspective, is that, the mind, which is, the sixth chakra, if we're just looking at the seven chakra system, the mind can only fully blossom if those chakras underneath it are pumping, a good percentage of energy upwards, right? So if energy is being stunted in the second and third chakras, then there is a diminishment of the capacity of the mind to do what it could do. So that's why I'm always trying to get people outside during the day, get them moving, because every body has a intelligence. And when I say body, I'm not saying everybody. I'm saying every body. Like, every body is built differently. It has a different shape. It has different requirements. It has different, nutritional needs, this, that, and the other. So if you're able to move, you should move. And you should move during the day. That's probably the easiest way I could say it. And then, so I've been really noticing that that's just been the most profound thing I've seen, is like, man, the solar plexus, like everybody, and it hasn't always been that way.
Mm.
Like, for a long time in my practice, I was watching a ton of shoulder issues and neck, like upper neck issues. And now it just seems things have gravitated into the solar plexus issues. So, and the thing is, too, is I work with a relatively healthy community, like down in Costa Rica. I mean, it's much healthier than what I perceive in Florida. So, and I don't know how that really would correlate to the stimulant of time. I know stimulants in general tax your adrenals. So actually
Mm.
that would be the correlation, is
Yes.
that the second chakra, kidneys, yeah, I see a lot of those issues. I have a lot of people that come to me with lower back issues, and there's nothing really wrong with their lower back, and so whether it's chronic dehydration, where the kidneys start to signal L4 and L5 to say stop, or they're overstimulated. Yeah, so that does make sense. I'm seeing lower back and solar plexus. So that's the direct correlation with my hands-on work that I've seen.
That's interesting that it then would be quite directly related with what we were talking about as a kind of aging, because this is very much, I think, where if you like, certainly from more of a Chinese perspective, there's a kind of wisdom associated with the kidneys. It's where a lot of our kind of ancestral wisdom comes from, and if this is being taxed or stressed in addition to the other stresses, particularly on the kidneys through things like fear and overstimulating the kidneys again to weaken them. And we have spoken about that at other times, Christopher. But this idea of the aging process is intriguing me, that we can see children aging beyond their years in some aspects, And this again is I don't know, it's a kind of forcing them to into a role or a body that is not consistent with their physical age. There's like a manufacturing there of aging, which is very, again, I find very perverse, along with all the other sort of perverse manipulations that are being done to the children. But this one is intriguing because it appears to be one thing that you could say, wow, there's such a maturity here. They're able to express, such a level of intellectual development, but actually is it, and at a loss of what? This innocence, this naivety, this curiosity. What's happening there in terms of this aging process? Where is that going?
It has a lot to do with music. So, you know me, I'm like the biggest Victor Schauberger fan out there. And for those people that don't know, who doesn't who doesn't know who Victor Schauberger is, he was a naturalist from Austria that was an incredible inventor, and he was up there like with the Nikola Teslas and the James Clerk Maxwells. Like he was a brilliant natural philosopher, the very, very rare mind and soul. And he talked about the health of a society is directly proportional to the health of its water, its forests, and its music. Mm. And when I was a kid, the big thing that started to come out was rap music, and with rap music you have bass, and there's lots and lots of bass. So what I've been witnessing over the last 25 years with that is that the complexity of the music has diminished. There's not many layers to it. There's the over stimulation of the thump, the percussion. I'm terrible musician. I don't know anything about musical terms. So to those musicians out there, I apologize beforehand. But the bass has, at least from a yoga perspective, it keeps you in your root chakra. So what I'm noticing is like I was over at this one house and I was working and they threw on some background music and the kids were listening to like Lady Gaga and like all this pop music that seems to be popular now. And it's terrible. Like it's horrifically bad. And I know I sound like an old man saying, their music these days, but there's something to it. Because as our water gets dirtier, as our forests go away, our music does diminish. So I always reflect on what Schauberger says. And in that, there is a loss of innocence. Because what are these women talking about in these pop songs? What are these men depicting in these popular songs? Yeah, on one level there's like a happy beat that you can move your butt to, but when you actually listen to the message, what's being imparted, it's soul degrading. Like on a very deep level, it's soul degrading. And so then this gets into like the whole esoteric aspect of like what's going on in Hollywood and what's promoted and what becomes popular and how these pop stars are idolized and sacrificed. I mean, it's a whole other can of worms that goes on. But what I noticed the most is that the media is so much more easily exposed. Like, you can listen to, like, as a kid, we had to wait. Like, if we heard something on the radio, then we had to, like, wait to save up enough money to go buy the tape or the CD, and there was a waiting game, which was, then you got to contemplate. You got to think. You got to, like, imagine yourself in that position. Like, there was a time delay in things. But now everything's instantaneous. Like, if you like something, then you can, like, binge on it. And so it moves you through things quicker, but because you're not actually taking a step back, you're like, oh man, eh. And so I've been a part of a couple of music festivals and at least the build crew, and I don't do heavy drugs like during the festival because I'm essentially working, and it's terrible. The only way you can survive these festivals is if you're doing drugs,
Mm.
because the level, the frequency range of the music, like if you're just to look at it from just a pure noise spectrum analysis, the frequency range is so low on the decibel range. There's no nothing. It sucks. It's just like droning. It's just this drone in the background. And when you look at the people that are engaged in it, that's where they're at. That's exactly, it's not like, being around, a ballet where there's, every part of the frequency range, from the symphonic, orchestra. It's a totally different consciousness. So part of the information overload that people are getting is this amount of media in the form of entertainment or entrainment that is debasing the consciousness of kids just because it's so low in the frequency range. It's just, there's no way around it. Like, you can't get around it. And I get mad at some of my friends that are parents because they let their kids, it's like I say let, like, it's in the new sphere, so it's going to happen, so it shouldn't be so judgmental. But they have a hard time moderating what their children imbibe. And so when I listen to just the lyrics and just the overall context of the music, it's like really terrible. There won't be families in the future. There won't be love. There, like, the music is loveless. Is probably the best way of saying it.
Very distorted. Yeah.
Even in the past, like when you'd have these horrible, 70s and 80s love songs, like musically they were terrible, but at least the person was singing and you actually heard their voice, and at least from a consciousness perspective, they were really like emotionally true, right? Now everything is this electronic coaxing of voices, and everything is like a pasty, facsimile of something else. It's just not even in the same ballpark of authenticity.
No, it's a very good observation again, and I'll throw one of my own in there because recently my own son, who is also exposed to a lot of the things that you're talking about for one reason or another, he spent a good week away on a wilderness survival, not a course, but a camp, I suppose, for children. And I got back some really interesting feedback in terms of how quickly, given that they are in an environment where they're supported and they're having fun and they're learning and they're remembering things quite possibly that they more naturally did as younger children, to be wild again, that they quickly drop any sort of electronic gadget attachment they might have in favor of the real authentic stimulants, of the smells of nature and the kind of scrapes and bruises and dirt that comes with all that adventure, and the contact again with natural elements, and the stimulus of being in an environment where people are interested in you and you can remember what it's like to be interested in others again, face to face. So I think, that I still feel that we're on the verge. We're very much on the edge with a lot of things, but I'm very encouraged to know how quickly this can be turned off, and the more authentic connections and communication come back onto line, and that even children that have been immersed for a long time in this electronic soup environment know the difference. They know the difference when they get it, and they seem still at the moment to take the more natural option. Now, how much longer that will continue, I don't know, but it would be good if we could work towards disengagement with the artificial and full communion with the natural, I think, in as many ways as possible. And this in turn would decrease the stimulant that you're talking about, that we get stressed with, that we age with, and would remind us of how actually to make the most of this long, beautiful, simple lifestyle that we can choose to have.
Part of the arrogance that is being generated through bad music and all the rest of it, and just this over inundation of information, is to actually, I think it's there to kill curiosity. If you're lied to enough and you get disillusioned enough, you will turn off your curious mechanism. I don't even know what you would call that, your curiosity, but the mechanism by which you want to explore things. I think we all have different thresholds for that. So, it's so beautiful that your son got to experience something like a back to nature camp. It's really neat because where I live, they have a bunch of those back to nature camps. And then I was just, this last weekend down in the Keys, I was speaking with a gentleman that has a study abroad program where they take college kids and they put them in a surf camp. And the whole thing is, he was saying, is like, you get, people that are a little bit more athletically inclined anyway because they like to surf. But at the same time, because they're engaging their body so much, and the thing about surfing or any type of interaction where there's danger, things get real quick. You get into the zone. And he says the level of absorption of information is so much higher than it would be just in a classical school setting. So all those types of things are really encouraging, and I see that there are people that are figuring it out, that are more wired like we are, and the people that we hang out with, and are like, okay, if we throw these kids in the forest and do this, that, and the other, then this happens. And they're having really good results, It's just, when I look at it from a big picture perspective, it's like that's never going to be the norm. That is a completely a complete outlier event. It's just like the numbers, it just couldn't afford it or play out that way. So it's a good thing for the few that can have it, but overall it's probably it's going to be a rarity. I see that there's going to be there is definitely going to be a huge split, almost like a break off civilization from the kids that actually got to be in nature and got to defrag from all the garbage relative to the kids that are constantly immersed in it.
It does seem that way, but at least then we can try our utmost to make sure that people are having a choice in that matter and are not necessarily herded, into an artificial environment, but at the very least have a choice and could experience both. I feel that's important because I don't, I know what I feel is the right route, is the right lifestyle, but of course I'm speaking for myself. I see the bigger picture and see the reasons why any control system would wish it to be an entirely artificial one, because this is obviously it's the best way that they can control the environment and the people within that environment. So I know where my choices lie, but I don't feel able to impose that on others. So the best I can do is keep providing spaces and reminders and opportunities for experiencing both, and being able to have, make a clear decision for yourself based on those experiences, but not to be denied the experience of a more natural way of living. That would be where my concern is at the moment, I think.
Right, right. I totally agree with you. It's kind of fun. I really enjoy hearing different people's perspectives, and I run almost all of the stuff that I write across Mackenzie because she's a really good editor and has a really good mind on her. And she brought it up yesterday, and it's just like anything. There's growing pains, and I do recognize that, like, there's emergent behaviors, and those emergent behaviors become problematic, and then people figure out solutions, and there's an ebb and flow, and it goes back and forth. I'm of the opinion that most emergent behaviors aren't so benign, just because history proves out that they're not. But when it comes to, like, overall, I think people are really good. Like, I think people left to their own devices are actually just really simple. They just want to have love and life and happiness and all these types of things. What we have to figure out is how to funnel the constraints that are artificial and take these constraints and dissolve them, because it's these constraints that amplify the more negative and deleterious behaviors of the human race. So, and I think they're doing that intentionally. So it's a big deal. Like, I don't have a solution when it comes to how and what children will listen to, or what they'll learn, or what anybody will learn. All I can say is that, it would really behoove people to expose themselves to the highest quality of things possible. Because that's something that gets lost in frequency. It's not about quantity of things, it's about the quality of things. Like, listen to somebody that is extremely eloquent. Like, eat food every once in a while that is like, it is very expensive or rare, or very high energy density. Listen to music where it took an orchestra, 110 instrument orchestra, to play it. Like, just expose yourself to things that are extremely high quality, and when you do that, it will kind of reset your frame of reference and being like, oh my God, why am I listening to, Katy Perry? Oh, wait a minute, why am I eating this fast food? Like, people need to have something to measure against, right? You need to have, like, a frame of reference. And then once you have a frame of reference, and you can say, holy shit, there's no reason why I'm going to listen to Glenn Beck. He only uses, 800 words in his lexicon. Why don't I actually listen to, John Rappaport? Like, somebody that actually can speak. Like, you just expose yourself to higher quality things. And the more you can expose yourself to higher quality things and expose your kidlets to higher quality things, we all, if we haven't been traumatized too much, actually have a high sense of self-worth, and we'll have this feeling within us of like, oh, that's what I should be giving my attention to. And it will bear out. It will end up, diffusing those things, those lower quality inputs.
Yes, I think you're right there, and I have fine examples here where I live. I'm lucky enough to have a stream of people coming through, some staying longer than others, but recently younger people, in their early 20s, and I've seen enormous amounts of creativity from using very basic materials, but showing an enormous amount of care and love and skill, actually. People making their own instruments to use, and in that way, coming into contact, building a relationship with the music and with the instrument and with themselves. So finding ways basically back to themselves through using these different tools that very often they're making themselves. And that to me is another indication of the very welcome reaction to the artificial. That the natural is actually coming on so strong and is being disseminated through the morphic field, or however it's being communicated. To me, it's spreading also like the antivirus to the mind virus. So
Right.
I do find it fascinating to be able to see, both sides of what's happening. I'm only ever left feeling enthusiasm and a lot of faith, actually in this conscious evolution occurring. It is occurring. How far
Yeah.
it will infiltrate into areas which are very dense and kept, I think, engineered this way, kept in a low vibration, I don't know. Time will tell. But I think it has the potential to break through that layer of resistance. I think it definitely has the potential to do it.
Yeah, like I vacillate in my recognition of like the watching what the millennials do, because at some certain points I'll teach a workshop and I'll have all these great people at the workshop, and these, kids in their young 20s, and they're so eager to learn, and they're everything that you just described. And then I'll come back to the States, or I'll come someplace that's outside of my norm, outside of my sphere of hippies.
Yeah.
And I see the other side of it. I
Mm.
see oh my goodness,
Mm-hmm.
just this weekend I was around this one young woman, and she was like so terribly arrogant. And so, she could not put her phone down, and she couldn't, everything that she talked about was pop culture, and there was just such this high level of arrogance in her demeanor. There was nothing out of the norm could be let in, right? So I see both sides of it. I get, through the funnel of Costa Rica or Spain and stuff like that, there's definitely a very specific subsect of the population that gravitates in those areas. And then the other side of it's not so pretty, the other side of it's like, whoa. But I do, like you said, I like your term of the antivirus of the mind. That's a really beautiful way of putting it. We shall see. It all comes down to also, a part of what helped me break away from I guess you would call it the NLP of pop culture, and or just the operant conditioning from my youth, was learning the trivium and the quadrivium. And I can't even say I've learned the quadrivium. I know what it is, but I haven't learned it per se. But the trivium is this very old method by which you can spot fallacies. You can tell if you're being lied to or not. You can tell when people are using manipulation tactics on you. And so when you learn those things, it's like, oh my God, they're trying to push me in this direction. Now this is trying to do this and this and this and this and that. And you measure it always against your five senses. And so because I'm a very chiral person, I always have my hands on people and things like that. And I always have my hands on the environment. I cannot discount the time pressure that I feel to fixing the physical environment, because I feel that we are epigenetic creatures, meaning that our environment either upregulates or downregulates our DNA. And so if our physical environment gets to a certain saturation level of toxicity, our bodies themselves and our consciousness hence will start to reflect that. So I feel a tremendous push in not allowing the perpetrators of oh, are you there?
Yes, I am. Yes,
I
I'm
just I
here.
just I just heard a clang.
Hmm.
That is interesting timing too. The the perpetrators of, I guess you'd say, globalism, just to keep it general, um, like to actually point out the physical, the actual destruction of the environment and do what we can to reverse that. Because if that goes away, just like our physical body, if that goes away, then we're going to have some real problems.
Yeah, well, certainly we have plenty of challenges, but I feel, we also have vast amounts of imagination, vast amounts of creativity, and very much a flow of, I think, a really, if I could even say a flood at times, of real information, which I think is also the subject of another conversation, along with the quadrivium and the trivium and these different ways of approaching and dealing with filtering, questioning the information, so that we don't get overstimulated, but we get just enough that we're able to contemplate, and more than enough that we're able to source from within us. This is very much, I think, part of the changeover, the shifting of what's happening at the moment, is where we're actually getting this information from. But I think before we're accused of having an information overload, perhaps we can just finish this conversation, which has been incredibly stimulating, but also
Yes.
very important, because I think we need to stop and look at the information,
Okay.
and see where it's driving us. Is it driving us crazy, or is it driving us to find some sensible, realistic, enjoyable solutions? So if I could ask you back, Christopher, at some very near date, because yet again, you've given lots and lots of juicy information to contemplate, and I certainly need to go and synthesize it now. So
Perfect.
if that is good timing and a good use of our time, then I wish you really, really well with everything that you're doing, everything you're contemplating and observing, and please come and share with us again very soon.
Sounds great, Louise. Thank you for having me.
Okay, be well. Bye bye,
Alrighty.
Christopher. Bye.
Bye bye.